Next is the Nigerian media and what should be its role in the country's fight against terrorism, banditry, and kidnapping. In the last 1 week, especially the issues of terrorism, banditry, and kidnapping have dominated Nigeria's news headlines. While some of these headlines and reports have been accused of being too sensational and heavily packed with hyperboles, others are perceived as being outrightly, quote, unpatriotic. And worried about the situation, groups like the International Press Institute is holding a conference scheduled for December, which will focus on the role of the Nigerian media and, of course, its fight against terrorism. And then it will also be looking at issues affecting journalists, such as tackling media repression. And this theme is tagged Countering Media Repression and Safeguarding Democratic Accountability in Nigeria. Now, this year's conference will bring together over 100 leading media executives, journalists, senior government officials, media freedom advocates, and academics from across the country. Well, for Mondays, we have joining us right away in the studio the Deputy President of the International Press Institute in Nigeria, Fidelis Mbah. I almost added doctor there.
well, not clearly off the mic. I will be in a few months.
Oh, interesting. Okay, interesting indeed. All right. So let's talk about this holistic view about Nigeria's current situation and how journalists and groups like yours, International Press Institute, could help moderate, a better atmosphere for democratic accountability, so that the press can uphold its, rights guaranteed in Section 22 to hold government accountable, and then not also being seen as a meddlesome interloper, especially on security issues.
Well, for colleagues, that's journalists in this case, we've always tried to do our best within the resources available to us, resources in terms of access, in terms of a safer environment to operate, in terms of, in the face of repression, in the face of harassment. If there's no harassment, if there's no repression of the media, if there's a safe environment, the journalist, is properly trained, and we've always tried to encourage our colleagues to stick to the facts and be professional. But in most cases, what happens is where government is not granting access, which leaves room for speculation, even though, that's not, it's not something we encourage. But then you leave some journalists who are not very professional to resort to speculation, just more like bringing their own opinion because they can't have certain information that they need. They don't have access to data. And so the onus really is on government. Release these documents, release these facts, grant access to information, grant interviews, be available to confirm certain speculations. With that, if, for instance, I'm giving, I have an access to maybe the president or an aide to the president about what's happening, daily updates or weekly updates or bi-weekly updates. If I speculate, definitely I know that this is leading to litigation and I might end up in jail. I wouldn't want to go the route. But a situation where even sometimes government will come out and say something that might actually turn out not to be true.
Yeah, we've seen a whole lot of denials under this government, reversal of policies, reversal of statements, and all of that. And sometimes it confuses us as journalists.
Yeah, it leaves the journalists a bit confused because Aid A is saying something, the state governor is saying something else, the Red Cross is saying something else, and then even the residents. Like now, the issue of Niger, there were reports that that the students from the Catholic school had been released, and then there were journalists who were on ground who went there and said, we can't find anybody. We've spoken with the parents, and the parents are saying these journalists have not been released. These students have not been released. It's just for government to centralize information management, grant access to colleagues, with journalists in this case, and then make sure that every information is central and also correct, so that it's not a case of one aide gives 20 people maybe abducted or 20 released, and then another one is coming up with another figure. So once that happens, you leave that to the journalists. And we always say, look, our aim is ensuring a freer environment for journalists to practice, ensuring that journalists are safe to be able to carry out independent journalism, not something that they will have to keep breathing down our neck. We always say, allow the journalists to breathe.
All right. The president is also good at saying that let the people breathe. So let's talk about the media space breathing and then talk about the entire civic space generally. You're holding this IPI conference in Nigeria here, and then it's meant to actually talk about different things like repression. I mean, let me read out the theme of your meeting, which is on countering media repression and safeguarding democratic accountability in Nigeria. What exactly has led to this, the couching of this theme?
Well, in recent months, we've noticed that there have been cases of abuse of journalists, harassment, threats. You know, the space is no longer as comfortable or free as it used to be. I mean, not just with this administration. I mean, in recent years. And we're saying, make the space a bit more comfortable for us to do our jobs. Because the public relies on the journalists to be able to get information, to be able to
especially verified and accurate
verified
information.
So that, you know, we're saying if you have anything against, maybe you're not comfortable with a particular report a journalist has done, all you need, there are avenues for you to seek redress. You either go to court, or maybe for like broadcast, you can go to the
NBC,
the NBC to say, okay, look, this station has blackmailed me, or they've committed defamation or something. You have avenues to seek redress, rather than someone just sitting ordering that a journalist should be picked up, kept in detention. Even as we speak, there's still some of our colleagues who are still in detention. Some have been going to court up and down. Recently, a former employee of This Day newspaper, Azuka, was, she was harassed repeatedly by the police. I mean, she was living in Lagos and meant to come and report in Abuja. She will have to fly in with her lawyer, come to Abuja for, maybe after a few hours, they will just say, okay, we'll see you again next week. Imagine the cost. She has to fly in, she has to stay in a hotel, she has to pay for airport taxi, she has to feed herself. So things like this have been happening, and it's creating fear and panic among journalists. But we're saying, make our job a lot easier, so that if for any reason we err in any particular way, you can seek redress. We don't have a problem with that. So also on our part, we've been trying to ensure that our colleagues are also properly trained in different fields to ensure that they are very professional, that they carry out their jobs professionally, so that we won't have cases of someone accusing them of maybe carrying out a wrong report, or maybe blackmailing them. So what we're actually looking at is because there's been increases in cases of attacks on the media. Recently, even in just a neighboring Niger state, the governor ordered the closure of a particular radio station, Badegi FM, just because they criticized a government policy or a government plan to build a flyover in a place where, the general manager was telling me that there were not even up to 500 vehicles plying that particular area. He was like, why should government spend such a resource on a huge project like this? Why not look for other avenues, to, like now he was complaining that there's no water in Mina. That why not tackle that? So something like that, I felt government should have been, the government in question now should have more like seen this as a wake-up call to maybe look at other areas and tackle the problems, rather than ordering the closure of the station, and even going as far as threatening to withdraw the license, which they don't have the right.
The state government doesn't have that power.
They were going to withdraw.
That's why the Minister of Information had to tell him, and coincidentally, the Minister of Information is from that state. Yes. Told him, Mr. Governor, you don't have that power.
Even to shut down the station, he doesn't have the power, because the only agency of government that is tasked with shutting down any particular station is the NBC. Even at that, the NBC has to go to court. It's based on the court interpretation of the case brought before it, that they will now resort whether they should close down, withdraw the license or not. Not for a governor, not for any other public official to take that decision. So that's why we're meeting now to look at this. And also, we'll also be launching something very interesting. We'll be launching a book of infamy, which is where we intend to include the names of perennial abusers of the
violators of the rights of journalists. Name and shame them.
We're not going to be naming and shaming henceforth, because we'll be writing press statements. Some of them are not taking it seriously. We've even been appealing to them, even sending people to call them. But some of them will just call our bluff. So now we're going a step further by planning to launch a book of infamy where we'll name and shame. So that
does that stop there, or you even send it to embassies and all of that? So that when you seek for visas,
as a deterrent to others who are planning to further, attack the press or more like harass journalists in their domain.
Yeah, and one of your guests that have been invited is Vice President Kashim Shettima, who is to be at that conference and all of that. What exactly do we hope to get at the end of this conference?
Well, why we're inviting him, the minister and other people, is so that they can also listen to our colleagues, because sometimes when we issue these statements, it just looks like, more like it might even not get to him, because given government bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. So there he will listen to us. He will say, look, these are the issues we are confronted with. So it's now left for him much later either to brief the president and say, okay, this is this, or also advise us on what best we can do. So by bringing together professionals, media owners, we'll be x-raying the challenges facing the media, especially in this country, and then looking at what's the solution. Even one of the things we'll be looking at also is the sustainability of the media. Adverts are shrinking. Funding media houses is no longer, a joke. So we're also internally looking at, okay, what can we do to be able to sustain media platforms? Because lately, some media platforms are folding. So we're also, using that as an opportunity to sit together, compare notes, network, and then advise ourselves as, okay, this is the best way possible. Because we're bringing experts, and also we'll be bringing out, a data of press harassments and repression across the country, so that even the vice president can see, not just that we're saying it, but this is based on verified data. And other government officials who will be present will also see the magnitude of attacks on the media in Nigeria.
All right, Fidelis, I can't let you go without talking about how journalists themselves are causing lots of problems in one way or the other, and they need to actually work in accordance with the law. So, for example, there's this issue of Mr. Ibrahim Hamza Mohammed, a reporter with First News, Lagos-based online portal, who was arrested by the Nasarawa State Command sometime last year until the IPI had to intervene. Now, he claimed that there was a theft of 40 million naira cash from Governor Abdullah Sule's bedroom in Nasarawa State. And the governor said, all right, I want to open my doors, come and prove to me how that happened in the bedroom. And before you know it, the journalists didn't have facts. How do you handle such issues? Because, you had to intervene. I know severally you had to call the governor to plead with him and all of that. Some people, especially within the online publishing space, take advantage of that, of some of the restrictions that we mainstream journalists are faced with to actually publish anything that they feel like. Sometimes lies, outright lies.
Okay, first of all, we're not holding brief for any journalist, especially a professional journalist who goes all out to blackmail anybody, or who goes all out to carry out fake news. We condemn that in total. And, we also, that's why we have a training program. We've been trying to take training programs to different regions to ensure that people are properly trained. Because especially with the online space, now somebody just wakes up who didn't go to a journalism school, who has no formal training. As long as he has data and he has a device, he sets up a website and starts publishing. So we've had that problem. Especially among those who are online bloggers. We've had that problem. Most of them are also not accepting to subject themselves to training. They feel like they've arrived. So we've had that problem. We acknowledge that is a big challenge. We're also trying to see what we can do. That's also part of the things that we'll be discussing. Because among even the online platform, they also have an association that's, trying to regulate their activities. But most of these other people who also have this website, especially those who are even doing TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, most of them, they just use that platform because of monetization, because of clickbait.
Yeah.
Now, because everybody wants Elon's money, they just publish what they want. And we're actually seriously against that. And we keep trying to appeal to people to be professional. As much as we want to intervene, but we also not close our eyes to our colleagues being unprofessional. So with constant training, also talking to them, and for our platforms like this, during the conference, where we'll also be looking at viable positions to be able to address these concerns, then we'll see if there will be a headway in the next coming weeks or months. All
right, I had to ask that question because one of the things you intend to look at is safeguarding democratic accountability in Nigeria. And accountability is not only meant for politicians, even Nigerian journalists ought to be accountable. Then I want to go to A recent, a write-up by Moise Banire, you know him and all of that, who just said in one of his statements, and I'm reading this article that he did for the cable, he said most headlines are becoming hazardous. One of the recurring problems is the sensational framing of security incidents, that's by Nigerian media, journalists and all of that. A kidnapping scare in one village becomes, quote, Nigeria under siege in banner headlines. A single bandit attack becomes, quote, government losing control. Unverified body counts become gospel truth. Such alarmist reporting, while commercially attractive, creates a climate of heightened fear, undermines investor confidence and corrodes public trust in state institutions. Is this a time for us to also look at the mirror as media practitioners to actually see how we can manage the situation for us to have a country first?
Well, sometimes, again, as much as we want to do that, which is a professional thing to do, but again, you can't really gag journalists completely from telling the truth. Yeah. If something is bad, we should be able to say it is bad.
Exactly because, the way it is.
Yeah, because sometimes if you try to more like bend it or try to color it, even your readers or your viewers will start seeing you like, oh, you've compromised. You know, it's not like you're lying. As much as we're advising people against going for clickbait because of monetization, but again, we can't shy away from reporting what is on ground because we're trained to actually say the truth as it is. And not because we can't, I mean, if we're all politicians and trying to just say because of country first, if people are killed, 30 people are killed, you just say maybe 5 injured. Like
manage the information.
Sometimes you see like the police, for instance.
Yeah.
You know, people will be maybe 30 killed, even people on ground that you've even counted the bodies 30. And sometimes you see they're giving you a figure of 5. I mean, in that case, you'll be seeing your viewers or your listeners or your readers will be seeing you like you're lying, you know. But the only thing we encourage is we encourage balance and not over-sensationalizing headlines. Say it as it is, but just not because of, monetization. You want people to click, you know, because there are some terrible headlines too. I also get to read some of them. But
once
again,
you read the body of the story, is something else and no facts.
Because we're trying to be, in this case, patriotic and play down reports. We're not happy. I mean, if things are working properly, if there are no attacks, we can't manufacture those attacks. But if attacks did happen, you can't control everybody and trying to gag the media and say, don't report the attacks.
All right.
We definitely have to report, but then we can just see how we can, to avoid creating unnecessary tension.
All right. Just before I let you go, Fidelis, talk to us about IPI. What exactly is IPI? And then who are those who make up IPI? Is it just like low-level journalists, senior journalists, editors, and whatnot?
Okay, IPI, International Press Institute, is an international organization in more than 100 countries of the world. IPI has been in existence for 75 years. In fact, we recently celebrated our 75th anniversary in Austria. In Nigeria, IPI has been here for some years, and basically the Nigerian chapter, and also by extension the international chapter, what we're after is for a freer and safer space for journalists to practice, and also for independent journalism. So, which is why you see us issue statements when journalists are being arrested. I see us talk about attempts to close down media or trying to gag the media. So we're just advocating for a safer and freer press. And
why do we need a safer and freer press?
Because the people need to know what is going on, and the people need to be properly educated. We can't, without a safer press, journalists will be practicing under fear, and with that fear, they won't be able to do their job properly. And
the people will be the biggest losers.
And then for membership, we look at the major gatekeepers, which is mostly for for senior editors, for media owners. It's not for every journalist, because IPI targeted the gatekeepers because they actually make the decisions in terms of what goes out in the media, in terms of who works for a particular platform, and in terms of also engaging with the government. At that senior level, that's where IPI operates. Well,
the controversy now returns as to who exactly is a journalist nowadays, because everybody almost with the phone and all of that claims to be a journalist, but the rule still remains the same, and mainstream media still has a role to play in the society. I guess that's what you're saying.
Yeah, because, not everybody is a journalist. That's the truth. you know, not all bloggers are journalists. I keep telling people. Somebody who just sits in his room and sends out a microblog that is causing tension is not a journalist.
Despite the followers, even
yes,
if he has 50 million followers or 100 million
followers, still doesn't make him a journalist. You know, ideally, a journalist should be properly trained and should be someone who abides by the ethics of the profession. Not just anybody who posts something on his Facebook to incite the public or maybe to cause confusion.
All right, we must thank you so much, and I hope our viewers are listening very well. Process the sort of information that you receive and be very sure that you're receiving it from a journalist. Yeah, I mean, sometimes we do have our own shortfalls here and there, but of course, information you get from a journalist is much more verifiable, reliable than, I mean, what you get out there. Not to say that bloggers are not welcome. I mean, this is the information age, right? Well, we'll continue to filter information to help us have, you know, verifiable content. And of course, we want to thank you, Deputy President of the International Press Institute, Fidelis Mbah, whose PhD is in the pipeline and almost coming to a close. We must thank you so much for joining us. Well, that's the much we can take on this edition of This Week. Thanks to our production team here in Abuja, Lagos, and London. Do join us same time next week for another exciting edition. Thank you. I'm Somna Sambo.